section 63 of Villette by Charlotte Bronte. This LibriVox recording is in the public domain. Recording by Leanne Fortune, section 63. In this sign I read a ruffled mood. He would dig thus in frozen snow on the coldest winter day, when urged inwardly by painful emotion, whether of nervous excitation or sad thoughts of self-reproach. He would dig by the hour, with knit brow and set teeth, nor once lift his head or open his lips. Sylvie watched till she was tired, again scampering devious, bounding here, rushing there, snuffing and sniffing everywhere. She at last discovered me in class. Instantly she flew barking at the panes, as if to urge me forth to share her pleasure or her master's toil. She had seen me occasionally walking in that alley with Monsieur Paul, and I doubt not considered it my duty to join him now, wet as it was. She made such a bustle that Monsieur Paul at last looked up, and of course perceived why and at whom she barked. He whistled to call her off. She only barked the louder. She seemed quite bent upon having the glass door opened. Tired, I suppose, with her importunity, he threw down his spade, approached, and pushed the door ajar. Sylvie burst in, all impetuous, sprang to my lap, and with her paws at my neck, and her little nose and tongue somewhat overpoweringly busy about my face, mouth, and eyes, flourished her bushy tail over the desk, and scattered books and papers far and wide. Monsieur Emmanuel advanced to still the clamour and repair the disarrangement. Having gathered up the books, he captured Sylvie and stowed her away under his paletot, where she nestled as quiet as a mouse, her head just peeping forth. She was very tiny, and had the prettiest little innocent face, the silkiest long ears, the finest dark eyes in the world. I never saw her, but I thought of Paulina de Bassompierre. Forgive the association, reader, it would occur. Monsieur Paul petted and patted her. The endearments she received were not to be wondered at. She invited affection by her beauty and her vivacious life. While caressing the spaniel, his eye roved over the papers and books just replaced. It settled on the religious tract. His lips moved. He half checked the impulse to speak. What? Had he promised never to address me more? If so, his better nature pronounced the vow more honoured in the breach than in the observance, for with a second effort he spoke. You have not yet read the brochure, I presume? It is not sufficiently inviting? I replied that I had read it. He waited, as if wishing me to give an opinion upon it unasked. Unasked, however, I was in no mood to do or say anything. If any concessions were to be made, if any advances were demanded, that was the affair of the very docile pupil of Père Silas, not mine. His eye settled upon me gently. There was mildness at the moment in its blue ray. There was solicitude, a shade of pathos. There were meanings composite and contrasted, reproach melting into remorse. At the moment, probably, he would have been glad to see something emotional in me. I could not show it. In another minute, however, I should have betrayed confusion, had I not bethought myself to take some quill pens from my desk and begin soberly to mend them. I knew that action would give a turn to his mood. He never liked to see me mend pens. My knife was always dull-edged. My hand, too, was unskilful. I hacked and chipped. On this occasion I cut my own finger, half on purpose. I wanted to restore him to his natural state, to set him at his ease, to get him to chide. Maladroit! He cried at last. She will make mincemeat of her hands. He put Sylvie down, making her lie quiet beside his bonnet grec, and depriving me of the pens and penknife, proceeded to slice, nib, and point with the accuracy and celerity of a machine. Did I like the little book? He now inquired. Suppressing a yawn, I said I hardly knew. Had it moved me? I thought it had made me a little sleepy. After a pause, Allons donc! It was of no use taking that tone with him, bad as I was, and he should be sorry to have to name all my faults at a breath. God and nature had given me trop de sensibilité et de sympathie not to be profoundly affected by an appeal so touching. Indeed, I responded, rousing myself quickly, I was not affected at all, not a whit. And in proof, I drew from my pocket a perfectly dry handkerchief, still clean and in its folds. Hereupon I was made the object of a string of strictures rather piquant than polite. I listened with zest. After those 2 days of unnatural silence, it was better than music to hear Monsieur Paul arranging again just in his old fashion. I listened, and meantime solaced myself and Sylvie with the contents of a bonbonnière which Monsieur Manuel's gifts kept well supplied with chocolate comforts. It pleased him to see even a small matter from his hand duly appreciated. He looked at me and the spaniel while we shared the spoil. He put up his penknife. Touching my hand with the bundle of new-cut quills, he said, Dis donc, petit sir, speak frankly. What have you thought of me during the last 2 days? But of this question I would take no manner of notice. Its purport made my eyes full. I caressed Sylvie assiduously. Monsieur Paul, leaning over the desk, bent towards me. I called myself your brother, he said. I hardly know what I am. Brother, friend, I cannot tell. I know I think of you. I feel I wish you well. But I must check myself. You are to be feared. My best friends point out danger and whisper caution. You do right to listen to your friends. By all means, be cautious. It is your religion, your strange, self-reliant, invulnerable creed, whose influence seems to clothe you in, I know not what, unblessed panoply. You are good. Père Silas calls you good, and loves you. But your terrible, proud, earnest Protestantism, there is the danger. It expresses itself by your eye at times, and again it gives you certain tones and certain gestures that make my flesh creep. You are not demonstrative, and yet just now, when you handled that tract, my God, I thought Lucifer smiled. Certainly I don't respect that tract. What then? Not respect that tract? But it is the pure essence of faith, love, charity. I thought it would touch you. In its gentleness I trusted that it could not fail. I laid it in your desk with a prayer. I must indeed be a sinner. Heaven will not hear the petitions that come warmest from my heart. You scorn my little offering. Oh, cela me fait mal. Monsieur, I don't scorn it. At least not as your gift. Monsieur, sit down. Listen to me. I am not a heathen. I am not hard-hearted. I am not unchristian. I am not dangerous, as they tell you. I would not trouble your faith. You believe in God and Christ and the Bible, and so do I. But do you believe in the Bible? Do you receive revelation? What limits are there to the wild, careless daring of your country and sect? Père Silas dropped dark hints. By dint of persuasion, I made him half define these hints. They amounted to crafty Jesuit slanders. That night Monsieur Paul and I talked seriously and closely. He pleaded, he argued. I could not argue, a fortunate incapacity. It needed but triumphant, logical opposition to effect all the director wished to be effected. But I could talk in my own way, the way Monsieur Paul was used to, and of which he could follow the meanderings, and fill the hiatus, and pardon the strange stammerings, strange to him no longer. At ease with him, I could defend my creed and faith in my own fashion. In some degree I could lull his prejudices. He was not satisfied when he went away, hardly was he appeased, but he was made thoroughly to feel that Protestants were not necessarily the irreverent pagans his director had insinuated. he was made to comprehend something of their mode of honoring the light, the life, the word. He was enabled partly to perceive that, while their veneration for things venerable was not quite like that cultivated in his church, it had its own, perhaps, deeper power, its own more solemn awe. I found that Père Silas, himself, I must repeat, not a bad man, though the advocate of a bad cause, had darkly stigmatized Protestants in general, and myself by inference, with strange names, had ascribed to us strange isms. Monsieur Emmanuel revealed all this in his frank fashion, which knew not secretiveness, looking at me, as he spoke, with a kind, earnest fear, almost trembling lest there should be truth in the charges. Père Silas, it seems, had closely watched me, had ascertained that I went by turns, and indiscriminately, to the 3 Protestant chapels of Villette, the French, German, and English, i.e., the Presbyterian, Lutheran, Episcopalian. Such liberality argued in the Father's eyes profound indifference. Who tolerates all, he reasoned, can be attached to none. Now, it happened that I had often secretly wondered at the minute and unimportant character of the differences between these 3 sects, at the unity and identity of their vital doctrines. I saw nothing to hinder them from being one day fused into one grand holy alliance, and I respected them all, though I thought that in each there were faults of form, encumbrances, and trivialities. Just what I thought, that did I tell Monsieur Emmanuel, and explained to him that my own last appeal, the guide to which I looked, and the teacher which I owned, must always be the Bible itself, rather than any sect of whatever name or nation. He left me soothed, yet full of solicitude, breathing a wish as strong as a prayer that if I were wrong, heaven would lead me right. I heard, poured forth on the threshold, some fervid murmurings to Marie, Reine du Ciel, some deep aspiration that his hope might yet be mine. Strange! I had no such feverish wish to turn him from the faith of his fathers. I thought Romanism wrong, a great mixed image of gold and clay. But it seemed to me that this Romanist held the purer elements of his creed with an innocency of heart which God must love. The preceding conversation passed between 8 and 9 o'clock of the evening, in a schoolroom of the quiet Rue Fossette, opening on a sequestered garden. Probably about the same, or a somewhat later hour of the succeeding evening, its echoes, collected by holy obedience, were breathed verbatim in an attent ear at the panel of a confessional in the hoary church of the Magi. It ensued that Père Silas paid a visit to Madame Beck, and, stirred by I know not what mixture of motives, persuaded her to let him undertake for a time the Englishwoman's spiritual direction. Hereupon I was put through a course of reading. That is, I just glanced at the books lent me. They were too little in my way to be thoroughly read, marked, learned, or inwardly digested. And besides, I had a book upstairs under my pillow, whereof certain chapters satisfied my needs in the article of spiritual law, furnishing such precept and example as, to my heart's core, I was convinced could not be improved on. Then Père Silas showed me the fair side of Rome, her good works, and bade me judge the tree by its fruits. In answer, I felt and I avowed that these works were not the fruits of Rome. They were but her abundant blossoming, but the fair promise she showed the world, that bloom when set, savoured not of charity. The apple full formed was ignorance, abasement, and bigotry. Out of men's afflictions and affections were forged the rivets of their servitude. Poverty was fed and clothed and sheltered to bind it by obligation to the Church. Orphanage was reared and educated that it might grow up in the fold of the Church. Sickness was tended that it might die after the formula and in the ordinance of the Church. And men were overwrought, and women most murderously sacrificed, and all laid down a world God made pleasant for his creatures' good, and took up a cross, monstrous in its galling weight, that they might serve Rome, prove her sanctity, confirm her power, and spread the reign of her tyrant Church. For man's good was little done, for God's glory less. 1,000 ways were opened with pain, with blood sweats, with lavishing of life. Mountains were cloven through their breasts, and rocks were split to their base. And all for what? That a priesthood might march straight on and straight upward to an all-dominating eminence, whence they might at last stretch the sceptre of their Moloch Church. It will not be. God is not with Rome. And, were human sorrow still for the Son of God, would he not mourn over her cruelties and ambitions, as once he mourned over the crimes and woes of doomed Jerusalem? O lovers of power! O meted aspirants for this world's kingdoms! An hour will come, even to you, when it will be well for your hearts, pausing faint at each broken beat, that there is a mercy beyond human compassions, a love stronger than this strong death which even you must face, and before it fall, a charity more potent than any sin, even yours, a pity which redeems worlds, nay, absolves priests. My third temptation was held out in the pomp of Rome, the glory of her kingdom. I was taken to the churches on solemn occasions, days of fete and state. I was shown the papal ritual and ceremonial. I looked at it. Many people, men and women, no doubt far my superiors in 1,000 ways, have felt this display impressive, have declared that though their reason protested, their imagination was subjugated. I cannot say the same. Neither full procession, nor high mass, nor swarming tapers, nor swinging censers, nor ecclesiastical millinery, nor celestial jewelry touched my imagination a whit. What I saw struck me as tawdry, not grand, as grossly material, not poetically spiritual. This I did not tell Père Silas. He was old, he looked venerable. Through every abortive experiment, under every repeated disappointment, he remained personally kind to me, and I felt tender of hurting his feelings. But on the evening of a certain day, when from the balcony of a great house I had been made to witness a huge mingled procession of the church and the army, priests with relics and soldiers with weapons, an obese and aged archbishop, habited in cambric and lace, looking strangely like a grey daw in bird-of-paradise plumage, and a band of young girls fantastically robed and garlanded, then I spoke my mind to Monsieur Paul. I did not like it, I told him. I did not respect such ceremonies. I wished to see no more. And having relieved my conscience by this declaration, I was able to go on, and speaking more currently and clearly than my wont, to show him that I had a mind to keep to my reformed creed. The more I saw of popery, the closer I clung to Protestantism. Doubtless there were errors in every church, but I now perceived by contrast how severely pure was my own, compared with her, whose painted and meretricious face had been unveiled for my admiration. I told him how we kept fewer forms between us and God, retaining indeed no more than, perhaps, the nature of mankind in the mass rendered necessary for due observance. I told him I could not look on flowers and tinsel, on wax lights and embroidery, at such times and under such circumstances, as should be devoted to lifting the secret vision to Him whose home is infinity and His being eternity. That when I thought of sin and sorrow, of earthly corruption, mortal depravity, weighty temporal woe, I could not care for chanting priests or mumming officials. That when the pains of existence and the terrors of dissolution pressed before me, when the mighty hope and measureless doubt of the future arose in view, then even the scientific strain, or the prayer in a language learned and dead, harassed with hindrance a heart which only longed to cry, God be merciful to me, a sinner. When I had so spoken, so declared my faith, and so widely severed myself from him I addressed, then, at last, came a tone accordant, an echo responsive, one sweet chord of harmony in two conflicting spirits. Whatever say priests or controversialists, murmured Monsieur Emmanuel, God is good and loves all the sincere. Believe then what you can. Believe it as you can. One prayer at least we have in common. I also cry, "O Dieu, sois apaisé envers moi qui suis pécheur." He leaned on the back of my chair. After some thought he again spoke. How seem in the eyes of that God who made all firmaments, from whose nostrils issued whatever of life is here, or in the stars shining yonder, how seem the differences of man? But as time is not for God, nor space, so neither is measure, nor comparison. We abase ourselves in our littleness, and we do right, yet it may be that the constancy of one heart, the truth and faith of one mind, according to the light he has appointed, import as much to him as the just motion of satellites about their planets, of planets about their suns, of suns around that mighty unseen centre incomprehensible, irrealizable, with strange mental effort only divined. God guide us all. God bless you, Lucy. End of section 63. Recording by Leanne Fortune.